Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is A Short History of China in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, for these, and for not only this one, we're going to talk about 5 terms that, as you go to learn more about a topic, that it's good to know, to keep in your minds, to make sure that you have an understanding of. So let's get into this. So the first topic, or the first term for us to be aware of, is something called canton. So in the 18th and into the early 19th centuries, of course, European powers as well as the Americans were very, very interested in global economic trade, global economic development, etc. Right? And this is very much the age of sail. And they saw trade with China in particular as incredibly lucrative. And wanting a favorable power dynamic here, nations like England and others sought to be able to take advantage of what they considered to be a relatively weakened Chinese state. Now, many in the British Empire and the Americans and others included have often misunderstood the effect that they would have, of course, on the history of China, not only then but now certainly. But what you end up seeing is the creation by the end of the 18th and the early 19th century as sort of a seat of trade, a seat of engagement and of communication and connection, and that's Canton. The idea was that this would be a place where the Chinese government and others could kind of control, where European powers and others would come in and engage in trading relationships in the country. Partly because they're well aware of what the Europeans and others are after, certainly what the British were accomplishing in India. That was certainly fresh in many of their minds. The second thing for us to be aware of is something called the Taiping Rebellion. Now this begins in 1850. It doesn't peter out to the mid-1860s, and it's a brutal conflict that many of us in the West perhaps haven't done enough to recognize or study. Because you're looking at millions and millions killed, and really a brutal civil war, within the Qing dynasty and the entirety of China, and it's coming off the heels of these opium wars where the British and others kind of are attacking on the periphery of China, and it's sort of this rebellion or this civil war kind of for the control and heart of China. And although the dynasty wins out, they're really damaged, and the last empress and all of that would sort of topple in the early 20th century. Which leads us to our third point, right, which is the open door, right? So at the end of the 19th and the early 20th century, European powers, again, the Americans included, have industrialized or are industrializing. They believe they have this glut of resources, this glut of goods, and they want markets for those goods, so they want colonies, and they want to be able to control these areas that they can't necessarily just take over. And so if they can't take over China, they want to be able to have full control in China, and they're pretty aggressive, of course, at this. And the Americans get involved, and they start what they called the open door policy, whereas they wanted to try to say, let's not impose our will in China, perhaps in the way that we might across Africa, the continent of Africa, but let's sort of let economics just kind of take root, and kind of the Chinese people will purchase whatever products that they're interested in purchasing, and of course the Americans recognizing that the more industrialized that they were becoming, thinking that this would ultimately benefit them and the British and that kind of thing. So supposedly good-natured policy that obviously had particular benefits for the Americans. The fourth point for us is the Boxer Rebellion. So the late 19th, early 20th century is a time period of social Darwinism. It's a time period of eugenics. It's a time period of clear racial ideologies at work in imperial policies and in imperial war. And you saw a clear angst and unrest on the part of Chinese individuals to this treatment and to what they saw as a clear encroachment on the authority of the Chinese state and on the dignity of the Chinese people. And so what you're going to see is a rebellion against this, right around 1899, 1900, 1901. And this leads to a unified sort of Western force. So you got American troops and British troops and others that go after this rebellion, which is occurring in major areas, to put it down. And they're successful in putting it down. But in many ways it's kind of a harbinger of things to come later. Now, again, the success of the Chinese Revolution, sort of by their minds for the Chinese communists, doesn't happen until the late 1940s. But the other thing maybe for us to keep in mind here, the fifth thing for us to keep in mind, is World War I. China plays a role in support of the Allies, actually during the First World War. So the Empress and the dynasty had just fallen. You have this question of what authority is going to sort of emerge, but you have nearly over 100,000 Chinese individuals who will deploy to the Western Front largely as laborers to provide assistance for the Allies during this particular time, which gives some question in terms of the position of China, kind of after 1918 and into 1919, this era of Sun Yat-sen and others. But their contributions here in support of the Allies in the First World War, should be regarded, because of course there'll be also with the Chinese nationalists and the communists some support, of course, against the Japanese invasion during World War II. All right, thanks so much.